So it's January 2025, and you know what that means, an obligatory YouTuber best of 2024, best of the previous year countdown list ranking. Although I don't really do rankings on my channel, I don't think art is a competitive medium by any means. Each film, in my opinion, should be able to stand on its own. While I do have a personal favorite of 2024 that I will talk about last in this video, just keep in mind that this ranking isn't really in any particular order. And despite however I title this video or whatever I put on the thumbnail, this isn't the best of 2024 objectively. This is all just my subjective opinions, as is everything on the channel. Unfortunately, due to the release schedules of the more prestige award ceremony type movies, I haven't been able to see every single great critically acclaimed movie of 2024, as I don't think anybody else has. I'm gonna go ahead and put up right here some images of movies that I really want to see but haven't got to yet. Who knows, maybe I'll include them on my best of 2024 on Letterboxd. Follow me there if you want to see this list get updated. I thought I would start this video off with some honorable mentions, some movies that I don't include on the actual list, but doesn't mean I didn't have a ton of fun with in theaters. They may be imperfect, every movie has its flaws, but I still had a blast watching them with family or friends. I saw Sonic the Hedgehog 3 with my younger brothers, and we all had an absolute blast with it. Easily, it's the best of the trilogy, which is kinda crazy that we have 3 pretty good Sonic movies. I'd actually go out of my way to say that Sonic 3 is a great movie, or damn near close to it. It embraces the insanity of what makes the Sonic films fun, it has far less of the annoying human side characters in it, and really focuses on the characters that you actually care about, like Dr. Robotnik and the trio of our main characters. Hopefully they continue this trend with the already announced sequel, where we move further away from the characters that we don't have established relationships with and really focus on our team of heroes, as I think they really nailed their personalities in the animation and voice acting department. My best friend Elizabeth and I went and saw Wicked together, and while I certainly had a great time with it, Elizabeth fell in love with it, seeing it immediately the next day. It was a very fun, very big musical with great performances, great songs, and we did absolutely hold space during Defying Gravity. Alien Romulus proved to be a very strong addition to the Alien franchise, and while I do think it relies a little too much on nostalgic fan service, I can't deny that some of the scares were actually effective, the atmosphere was gorgeous, and it managed to actually feel like it belonged in the Alien franchise more than the last few Alien films actually did. Smile 2 was probably the biggest surprise that I got in terms of a sequel this year. I had absolutely no interest in the first film, I was unable to connect with any of the characters in it, but shockingly, Smile 2 had a stronger protagonist that I was able to invest in, better scares, and a much more confident and refined style from its director. It's far from perfect, but overall I think it's a major improvement from the first film, and I really can't wait to see what he does next. Alright, with the honorable mentions now out of the way, I think it's time to actually get into my official personal favorite films of 2024. Completed in 2022, but not officially made available on video demand until 2024, Mike Cheslick's Hundreds of Beavers is an example of taking the simplest, silliest premise and getting the most you can out of it. Just about every possible gag you could come up with is utilized to perfection here, each of them landing in ways that are either perfectly built up, built upon, or are entirely unexpected. This is one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time, and it's funny in ways that you don't really see too often anymore. Stylistically harkening back to everything from the Tex Avery Looney Tunes animations to the films of Buster Keaton, on a very small budget, Cheslick utilizes some of the most creative filmmaking techniques you'll see to get the biggest laughs possible. While there will be some films that I talk about later on that definitely won't appeal to every kind of audience, I think just about everyone can sit down and enjoy Hundreds of Beavers. You'd be doing yourself a huge favor by checking this one out, and you'll be supporting an insanely funny, creative artist in the process. If you're in the mood for an old school, cartoonishly violent, and absurd laugh, rent this one when you get the chance.
Yo, what the f*** are you doing? Hey, I'm sorry, dude, you don't smoke in here!
I have very mixed feelings about how the era that I grew up in is now being looked back upon by filmmakers in the same way that the 80s and 90s was for a while. Feelings of existential dread and aging aside, I can't deny that the early to mid 2000s has a certain cringy charm to it. What would be the social media age was still in its infancy. Pop culture was either at its absolute peak or valley, depending on who you ask, and the days of running around with your immature friends into the early hours of the morning makes for some truly great familiar filmmaking. The next two films that I'm going to talk about take place in this era, and Rap World comes at it from a very satirical, yet somehow still grounded and real place. If you had told me that Connor O'Malley had somehow acquired a time machine and went back to 2009 to both shoot and edit this movie, I'd 100% believe you. The shitty camera quality, the clothing, the music they play in their car, the early digital photography and editing choices, it's all completely accurate to the time, chronicling how these immature 20-somethings with ambitions of being famous rappers are trying to produce a hit album all in a single night. Hilariously, this movie has no issue pointing out how cringe this era was, yet underneath it all, there's still a surprising amount of emotion here. As naive as these characters are, you get the feeling that they're trying their best to hold on to these times, to avoid the responsibilities of growing up and moving on, to make their big break before settling into adult life. All of this culminates in an ending that had me crying laughing from how darkly hilarious it was. This is a very funny movie, and it's also entirely free right here on YouTube. So if this looks like something you're into, give it a watch.
What are you doing?
Letra?
So Asian.
While Rap World took a more satirical approach to the era, Sean Wang's Didi reminisces on the mid-2000s in a very personal, yet still pretty funny light. The elements of the time are all there, with a much heavier focus on the burgeoning world of YouTube and social media and how it affected younger people. But he also observes the time through a cultural lens, following a Taiwanese American boy as he grows up in a world that he feels he hasn't yet found his place in. One of the issues that I always find the coming-of-age genre suffers from is in how it portrays the protagonist. They're either too unlikable or self-inserts of the director that make choices that no kid that age would make. Didi does not have these problems because Wang writes Chris like an actual kid that you either knew or were growing up. At this age, a lot of us struggle with discovering our passions, living up to the expectations of our parents, navigating our first crushes, and dealing with peer pressure. But a lot of us don't externalize or talk about those struggles, choosing instead to deal with it on our own, which can lead us to feeling that much more isolated and lonely. Wang explores this reality of growing up and adds the perspective of an immigrant family, dealing with things like internalized, even casual racism. As Chris lashes out against his mother, a woman dealing with her own struggles of sending her daughter off to college and settling into the life that she never expected to have, I never found myself disliking him because the writing helped me to understand him. As hard as this film can be to watch at times, it's not a bummer. It's very funny, and even manages to pull at your heartstrings toward the end as Chris and his mother start to truly understand one another. I love this movie, and it's one of the best examples of this kind of story that I've seen in a while. I understand that this was a pretty divisive film on release. The frankly expert level marketing that Neon employed to hype this thing up set certain expectations for many that ultimately left them rather disappointed when it wasn't the scariest thing on earth. While I both acknowledge and get that perspective, for me, Osgood Perkins's Longlegs delivered on everything that I wanted going in. A noir horror mystery film that slithers into your mind as you watch it. There's an evil on display here that I can only describe as venomous. The direction allows that evil to remain in the dark edges of the frame rather than entirely on display, letting your mind fill in the blanks of what is set up to be either supernatural or entirely psychological. It's a great mystery that is gorgeously shot and superbly acted. Micah Monroe is a great lead, and yes, Nicolas Cage is fantastic as the titular Longlegs. Many would argue that his performance is over the top and weird, and to those of you who say that, yeah, he's a crazy serial killer. His performance was just as off-putting and bizarre as one would expect from a character as hideously deranged as Longlegs is written to be. I don't know, maybe it didn't work for everyone, but I kinda loved this movie, and I think the years will be kind to it. Hey, if I'm not here to be honest in how I feel, why am I here at all? I like a crazy, demented movie, and I got one in Longlegs. Whatever Osgood Perkins is cooking up next, I'll be there, no doubt about it.
おかえりなさい。まだいたんだ。ていうかそこの配給終わったの？うん。学校行ってないから楽勝です。でも45ページって全然完成する気しないですね。ね。ずーっと書いてんのに。
Kiyotaka Oshiyama's Look Back is the second film I've talked about so far to be under an hour long, the first being Rap World. The reason I draw attention to the runtime of this movie is that it's one of the many things about it that I feel is an entirely deliberate choice by the filmmakers. The friendship that defines these two characters, the beautiful relationship that urges them both to their full creative potential, feels so understated and real that it seems like it could just go on for a lifetime. I'd watch it for a lifetime. I'd read all of the manga that they created together. I'd smile as Fujino brings Kyomoto further out of her bubble, and as Kyomoto inspires Fujino to pursue her passion with a fire that only a person like her can inspire. But I can't watch that lifetime unfold. We get just under an hour because, beautifully and tragically, we don't always get as long as we'd hope with those who make us better. We either choose different paths, or even more tragically, lives are cut short. Events that so often feel out of our control disrupt the things that we hope will continue forever. Look Back presents us with both the joy and pain that can come from reflecting upon those moments. What we could have done differently for just a few more minutes. Would we choose to change just one thing so we could have a different outcome? Would that different outcome deprive us of the moments we make together with those that we love? When the credits rolled, I sat thinking of the relationships that have made me better, more creative, more caring. This movie made me more grateful for the people in my life, and that's a staggering achievement. These are the thoughts that Look Back inspires, and this is the reason I recommend it so highly. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you'll be swept away by this story. It's worth every minute.
We got little scars from the sparks, and when we put our arms together, they formed a face.
Oh, look, Gracie.
It felt great when we did this. Our feelings aligned.
Too often, the label of adult animation is used to simply have cartoon characters swear or make crude jokes while sidestepping actual adult conversations and topics that can be uniquely explored through the medium of animation. Adam Elliott is a mature filmmaker, and Memoir of a Snail is a mature film. It touches on some very real shit beneath its adorable stop-motion characters. Grace Puddle, as a character, feels more realized than most live-action characters I witnessed in 2024, and that's saying something. The combination of Sarah Snook's performance and Adam Elliott's dialogue crafts a character that grows in ways that feel authentic. Learning from all the great people in her difficult life, learning most importantly that she can be independent and strong without them. It's a story about choosing to let go and move on, no matter how long it may take one to come to that decision. Stop motion has a special place in my heart, and I respect that Adam Elliott is one of the filmmakers still out there choosing to tell mature, yet still funny and heartfelt stories within the medium. This is another movie that I think really anyone can enjoy. There's a sincerity to it that should appeal to all audiences, should they choose to give it a chance. I highly encourage you to do so, because this is my favorite animated film of 2024. I love it.
Come here.
Which one of these?
In what is easily the sexiest movie of 2024, Luca Guadagnino directs the hell out of a trio of actors who each give their very best performances to date. I am in love with this screenplay. The way that the narrative uses the game of tennis to explore the psychology of these very, very complicated people. The two best friends who compete both off and on the court for the love of Tashi Duncan, played by Zendaya in a performance that blew me away. She's able to convey so much in such subtle facial changes with no dialogue. Each slight head tilt and eyebrow raise undercut whatever she's saying, hiding her true intentions, which aren't always clear. This is a movie about competitive people and the imperceptible line between their professional and personal lives. It's ambiguous, it's hot, it's sweaty, it's challenging. I'm so sorry. Each scene builds and builds and builds to an unbelievable climax, pun absolutely intended. When the trailer for this thing dropped, I was already hooked by the promise of Guadagnino's already established directorial style, as well as the promise of another amazingly unique score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. But what really got me to watch this thing more than anything else is that this incredible screenplay was written by this absolute legend. Denis Villeneuve delivered the biggest film of 2024. Biggest in ways that I thought were really no longer possible. Cinematic events like this just don't really happen anymore unless they're built up from 10 years of a cinematic universe or play on the nostalgia of the audience. Dune doesn't do either of those things. This isn't a film concerned with being like anything else you've seen before. Its goal is to deliver unto audiences an incomparable sci-fi epic, and it succeeds at every turn. It's easy for a director to get lost in the spectacle of it all, but Villeneuve never forgets that the characters are the core of this story. Paul is a fascinating protagonist in that he's not exactly the quote-unquote hero that we usually get from this kind of story. His choices have weight and consequences. His gift is to rally and inspire, but the screenplay never shies away from the damage that the fanaticism that he inspires can do. Timothée Chalamet brilliantly lets us into the mind of this character as he struggles with his ambitions and reluctantly falls into the role that has been long prepared for him, while Zendaya, in another standout performance, portrays Chani as the true character we should keep our eyes on, symbolic of the kinds of people left behind when charismatic figureheads use them as a means to an end. Dune Part 2 is an unbelievable achievement, delivering on its promised epicness, but never forgetting what Frank Herbert intended in its original novel. I cannot wait for Messiah.
What about you? Do you like girls?
No.
Boys?
I think that I like TV shows.
I Saw the TV Glow is a horror film, but not in the conventional sense. What this film meant to me will vary greatly from what queer audiences perceive, as director and writer Jane Schoenbrunn included very purposeful allegorical story elements and symbolic imagery to relate this story to the experiences that they felt finding their own identity. I believe that all kinds of audiences, nonetheless, will be emotionally affected by what the film has to say about the media that we use to explore ourselves. The way that we get lost in the art that we consume to run from the world that scares us so much. For those of us who are different, who struggle with our identities in ways big or small, the media that we love can often feel more real than the real world. Our lead characters embrace this escapism to deal with the difficulties of their lives. But the tragedy of the story being, these escapist fantasies should encourage us to act upon the things we must embrace about ourselves, lest they lose their luster and just become too painful to revisit. This is where the horror of this film comes from. Sometimes we have to listen to that thing from beyond that's telling us that we aren't comfortable the way that we are. And while it may be scary, we must embrace that change that will ultimately make us happy, or we risk a part of ourselves, the part that makes us beautiful and whole, slowly dying as we go through life a shell of what we should be. That reality is the horror of I Saw the TV Glow. Not monsters, weird imagery, or offbeat performances, although the film does definitely have all of those things. It's the way that it confronts the fear of rejecting who we should be. I adore how personal a film this is for Schönbrunn, the influences that they took from filmmakers like David Lynch, specifically referencing Twin Peaks in interviews. They've managed to carve out their own style and way of telling a personal narrative that is both moving and horrifying. The ending of this film has been living in my head since I first saw it, and I could say a lot more about it, but I think the best reviews that I've read online on places like Letterboxd are from people who are trans or are in the process of transitioning. It's filmmakers like Schönbrunn, I feel, that are going to inspire the next wave of great storytellers who are going to explore their identities in this medium, and I can't wait to see the effect that this film will no doubt have. I'd go as far as to say that this might be a new modern masterpiece in its own right. I've got a lot of love for this movie, and if any of that sounded interesting to you, please watch it. It's excellent. In Evil Does Not Exist, Ryusuke Hamaguchi explores the concept of balance in a way that I rarely see. There's an equilibrium that he focuses on, the first shot of the film being this long take moving under the trees, only occasionally broken by the opening credits. The unfeeling presence of the natural world looms over this film. The characters who inhabit the small mountain village live calmly, peacefully. There's this feeling that things simply are the way that they should be. Evil doesn't exist because there is a harmony, a nonchalance, a pattern that the world and the people that live off of it fall into. The perceived evil is merely violence, and violence takes many forms. A community that is endangered by urban development will verbally strike back, just as a wounded animal protecting its young will attack the ignorant tourist. The citizens of this small village are encroached upon by a company intending to develop a glamping site, disturbing their way of life and not thinking of the effect that this could have. For about an hour and 20 minutes, this is a very calm movie. Takes beautifully linger on the forest as the gorgeous score by Aiko Ishibashi swells in the background. As much as there's a focus on this balance, however, there's this constant interruption. The score will abruptly end in strange places, feeling like a mistake. Just as we begin to get settled into this beautiful world, something pulls us out of it. But the film forces us to consider whether that interruption is necessarily evil. Do the people who represent the developers act with malicious intent, or are they simply doing their jobs? Does the environment that the villagers fight so hard to preserve even acknowledge their existence? Is that perceived balance just that? An illusion that we dare not break in the face of the uncaring, unforgiving world that we inhabit. Masterfully crafted from top to bottom, there's so much to discuss about Evil Does Not Exist long after it's over that I can't not consider it one of the very best of the year. This is the third time on this channel that I'm talking about Nosferatu, and honestly, it probably won't be the last. My friends and family can all back up just how obsessed I am with this film, and with apologies to them for how much I just won't shut up about it, Robert Eggers just crafted the kind of movie that I can never tire of. If I was judging it purely on aesthetics alone, then it would obviously be a home run regardless of story, but there's so much symbolism and meaning packed into every moment that sitting back and talking about it for hours is just part of the experience. I've already mentioned it in my last video that I could do an analysis of the entire film, and since it was just announced that the physical release is going to feature an extended cut, something tells me that that video is probably going to happen. I love this movie and I'm going to keep talking about it until I run out of things to say. If you're a fan of the channel, you've already heard me praise the hell out of it in my last video. So if you're new here and you want to hear me ramble on about it some more, I recommend you check that video out. Nosferatu was kind of primed to be my absolute favorite film of 2024, almost a given, but something else came out this year that surprised me. Something that had me leaving the theater with my mind already made up. The next movie that I'm going to talk about is my absolute favorite film of 2024, and honestly, as much as I love the other movies I've talked about so far, it wasn't even close.
Yes.
Hello. I'd like to order.
The substance is everything. It's absolutely unhinged, but in the most uncompromising and controlled way. When I watch it, I feel like there wasn't a single idea that director Coralie Fagiette had that she had to throw away because it went too far. That sheer confidence in her directing style is made even more impressive when you consider that this is only her second film. Where most films that address the beauty standards that Hollywood imposes on women can come across as cliche and preachy, The Substance takes an approach that's honestly so refreshing. It's a film that's tired of the hypocrisy, tired of the control, tired of the male gaze, tired of fighting to stay relevant in a male-dominated industry. It takes its message and, very purposefully, beats you over the head with it within an inch of your life and then mutilates whatever's left. It's not a subtle, quiet protest, but a violent, blood-curdling scream. A movie that just doesn't give a fuck, but never comes across as sloppy or uneven. Every single decision made was the right one, from the expressionistic set design, the insanely varied cinematography that ranges from extremely wide to tightly claustrophobic, sometimes in the same move, to the pulsing soundtrack that energizes just as each scene ramps up, and to the brilliant casting of Demi Moore, who delivers, in my opinion, the finest performance of her career. Many will be put off by how crazy this movie is, made uncomfortable by its lingering shots of the grotesque, and that's the point. It takes the often lingering, sexualized gaze of the camera and turns it against the audience, forcing them to confront the bizarre, twisted final form of their absurd demands. There's so much creativity on display here, so much vision brought to life, and so much damn fun to be had during it that even now, shooting this, I want to put it on again just to be absorbed into its chaotic, absurd, beautifully insane world. It has just about everything that I want in a movie and more, and that's why it's my absolute favorite movie of 2024, hands down. So as with every single video that I make like this, I want to end it by opening up the question to you. What are some of your favorite movies that you saw in 2024? And hell, maybe not just movies. What are some of your favorite video games or TV shows, anime, animated series that you watched in 2024? Let me know in the comments. I really love to read them. I want to take a moment here to thank every single one of you for your support of the channel throughout the entire year of 2024. Thank you to all who joined the Patreon. Thank you to my executive producers, Lapis Lazuli VA and Lizard Gang, and to any of you who just watched the channel, whether you subscribed or you joined the Patreon, whatever you do. Thank you for just liking the video, commenting, or just watching it. 2024 was a great year for the channel, and 2025 I think is going to be even better. I'm making a commitment that I'm going to make some of the best stuff that I've ever made this year. I'm working very hard already, and I cannot wait for you to see what I've got cooking. Leave your comments below, support the channel, like and subscribe if you feel like it, and thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.